students, welcome to lesson 10, Major Steps in Social Research. Research process refers to different steps involved in a desired sequence in carrying out research. Social research is the systematic method of discovering new facts or verifying old facts, their sequences, interrelationships, causal explanations, and the natural laws which govern them. Social research is application of scientific procedures, of purposeful control, of analysis and of synthesis at a higher level of generality to the social human phenomena. Objectives. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to understand the major steps in research. Steps in research. Each step in research includes under it a set of interrelated operations, each of which is important in its own way in influencing the value of the research results and their worth. The important steps in research are choosing a research topic, defining the research problem, review of literature, formulation of hypothesis, research design, defining the universe of study, determining the sample design, collection of data, analysis of data, testing of hypothesis, generalization and interpretation, and it concludes with report writing. Let us discuss these major steps in research little briefly. The first step is choosing a research topic. The first step in research process is choosing a topic, as we have discussed. There are innumerable topics from which a researcher has to choose. Many sociologists choose a topic based on a particular theoretical interest they may have. For example, Emile Durkheim's interest in the importance of social integration motivated his monumental study of suicide. Many sociologists since 1970s have had a theoretical interest in concepts like development, gender, and this curiosity has motivated an enormous volume of research. The link between theory and research lies at the heart of sociological research process as it does for other social, natural, and physical sciences. Many sociologists also choose a topic based on their interest in a social policy interest. For example, sociologists concerned about poverty have investigated its effects on individuals' health, educational attainment, and other outcomes during childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. Sociologists concerned about racial prejudice and discrimination have carried out many studies documenting their negative consequences for people of color. Another source of choosing research topic is personal experience. Like other social scientists, many sociologists have had various experiences that lead them to study a problem from a sociological viewpoint. The second step is defining the research problem. Selecting and properly defining the research problem succeeds after selecting the topic. The problem to be investigated must be defined appropriately. Initially, the research problem may be stated in a broad way and later it can be narrowed down in operational terms. Essentially, two steps are involved in formulating the research problem. Firstly, understanding the problem thoroughly, and secondly, phrasing it into meaningful terms from operational or analytical point of view. Apart from the research problem, these aspects should be stated clearly in research problem. What are they? Firstly, rationale behind the research problem. Secondly, the aims and objectives as per the requirements of the research questions. The statement of objectives determines the data to be collected, hypothesis to be tested, techniques for data collection and analysis to be adopted, and the relations intended to be explored. Thirdly, the research questions on the basis of the objectives and the theoretical arguments or foundation on which it rests. Fourthly, developing the ideas through discussions, and fifthly, rephrasing the research problems identified into a working proposition. The different steps to be followed while defining the research problem therefore are: statement of the problem first in a general way to be later refined with the help of literature review, understanding the nature of the problem and surveying the available literature. While defining research problem, technical terms, concepts, words and phrases used in research problem should be explicitly defined. The basic assumptions or postulates relating to the research problem need to be clearly stated. A clear and specific statement of the investigation should be provided. The time period required, scope of the study including its limitations, the sources of data must be explicitly mentioned. The third step is review of literature. The review of literature helps to gain insights in the research topic, gain information and acquaintance about the data and other materials on the theme of proposed area of research. The literature reviewed may be classified into two types. Firstly, literature relating to the concepts, and secondly, the empirical literature consisting of findings in quantitative terms by studies conducted in the area. This will help in framing research questions to be investigated. Academic journals, conference proceedings, government reports, books, etc. are the main sources of literature. Presently, large volume of literature is being accessed through internet. Review of related literature is done with the objective of these aspects. Firstly, to provide theories, ideas, explanations or hypothesis formulation which are likely to be helpful in the formulation of research problem. Secondly, to avoid overlapping studies. Thirdly, it helps to suggest the methods of data collection, procedures to explore the sources of data and statistical techniques appropriate to the solution of the problem. Fourthly, it facilitates comparison of data and findings of earlier researches which are of use in the interpretation of data and analysis of results. Fifthly, the researcher gains expertise in his or her area of interest and keeps the researcher well informed of the most recent development in the area of activity. An overall view with focus on nature of the concepts and variables within the theoretical system is important. Further, the researcher should embark upon reviewing the empirical researches conducted in the concerned field. It is mandatory to record the references with complete bibliographic data. The main sources of literature are books, periodicals, encyclopedias, handbooks, yearbooks and guides, abstracts, dissertations and theses, newspapers, etc. These are of immense use to the researcher and paves the way for a good research. The fourth step is formulation of hypothesis. Specification of working hypothesis is the next step of research process. A hypothesis is a tentative statement made which needs to be tested for its logical and empirical confirmation. Hypothesis can be formulated as a proposition or set of propositions providing most probable explanation for occurrence of some event or specified phenomenon. Hypotheses, when empirically tested, may either be accepted or rejected. A hypothesis must therefore be capable of being tested. A hypothesis stated in terms of a relationship between the dependent and independent variables are suitable for econometric treatment. The manner in which hypothesis is formulated is important as it provides the required focus for research. It also helps in identifying the method of analysis to be used. Prior thinking about the subject, examination of the available data and material related to the study, discussion with colleagues and experts help the researcher in formulation of hypothesis. Exploratory or descriptive research can be carried out even without hypothesis. The next step is research design. Research design is the logical conceptual structure within which research is conducted. It is the blueprint for the collection, measurement and analysis of data. By providing answers to various questions and as a blueprint, it helps in carrying out research with validity, objectivity, accuracy and also economically. Research designs vary according to the research purposes as well as from the point of view of working procedure. From the research purpose point of view, there are 4 categories of research design. They are exploration, description, diagnosis and experimentation. From the viewpoint of realizable working procedure, there are 4 parts of research design. They are sampling, observational, statistical and operational. Sampling design describes the different sampling methods to be used for selection of units for study. Observational design describes the way in which the observations are to be made. Statistical design deals with the statistical techniques to be applied in the analysis and interpretation of data. Operational design deals with the specific techniques by which the entire operation of research is to be carried out. The process of working out a research design involves these aspects: making decisions with reference to the research problem or purpose about the techniques to be employed for collection of relevant data. The safeguards to be employed in the interest of validity, reliability and precision of the instrument of data collection, the mode of drawing the sample from the universe. Size of the sample that would best serve as a basis for drawing fairly acceptable inferences about the population of which the sample is a part. Organizing or analyzing the data, interpreting the results of analysis. Effecting compromises prompted by practical exigencies without adversely affecting the quality of work beyond a tolerable limit, etc. The researcher has to anticipate the field situation, which goes a long way towards helping himself or herself to get prepared and armed against future hazards. Through designing the research, the investigator ensures that he or she will most probably achieve his or her research objective without having to spend prohibitive amounts of time, money and energy. The 6th step in research is defining the universe of study. The universe of study comprises all the items or individuals under consideration in any field of enquiry. In statistical terms, a universe or population refers to the aggregate of individuals or units from which a sample is drawn and to which the results and analysis are to apply. The researcher may distinguish between the target population and survey population so as to clearly define the universe of study. The target population is that population for which the results of research are required. On the contrary, the survey population implies those items or individuals which are actually included in the sampling frame from which the sample is drawn. However, in most sociological purposes, such a distinction is not deemed to be significant. In any case, a complete population must be very explicitly defined in terms of elements, sampling units, extent and time. The seventh step in research is determining sampling design. The complete record of all the items in the universe is not possible. It takes a great deal of time, money and energy. Therefore, a representative sample is selected. It is a definite plan chalked out prior to actual collection of data for obtaining a sample from the universe. The sample must be representative and adequate. The significant elements of sampling design are defining the population. Population must be defined in terms of elements, sampling units, extent and time, because there is very rarely enough time or money to gather information from everyone or everything in a population. The goal becomes finding a representative sample or subset of that population. Sampling frame. A sampling frame has the property that helps to identify every single element and include in the sample. The most straightforward type of frame is a list of elements of population, preferably the entire population with appropriate contact information. A sampling frame may be a telephone book, a city directory, an employee roster, a listing of all students attending a university, or a list of all possible phone numbers. Sampling unit. A sampling unit is a basic unit that contains a single element or a group of elements of the population to be sampled. The sampling unit selected is often dependent upon the sampling frame. If a relatively complete and accurate listing of elements is available, for example, register of purchasing agents, one may well want to sample them directly. If no such register is available, one may need to sample companies as the basic sampling unit. Sampling method. The sampling method outlines the way in which the sample units are to be selected. The choice of the sampling method is influenced by the objectives of the research, availability of financial resources, time constraints, and the nature of the problem to be investigated. All sampling methods can be grouped under two distinct heads, that is, probability and non-probability sampling. Sample size. The sample size calculation depends primarily on the type of sampling designs used. However, for all the sampling designs, the estimates for the expected sample characteristics, that is mean, proportion or total, desired level of certainty and the level of precision must be clearly specified in advance. The statement of the precision desired might be made by giving the amount of error that can be accepted. The common levels of precisions are 5% and 10%. Sampling plan. The specifications and decisions regarding the implementation of the research process are outlined. The proper specification of the sampling plans would make the work easy. The next step is to select the sample. The final step in sampling process is the actual selection of the sample elements. This requires a substantial amount of office and fieldwork, particularly if personal interviews are involved. The next step in research is collection of data. Collection of data is an essential part of the research process. Data can be primary or secondary. Data collected by the researcher is primary. The data already collected by some agency and available in some published form is secondary. There are two main techniques of data collection. Firstly, census and survey methods. Secondly, observation method. Primary data can also be collected by means of experiments, that is, yield under certain conditions, observation at many time points of a certain phenomenon, etc. Intensive fieldwork methods include observation, interview, case study, etc. A pilot study is one of the important stages in a research project and is conducted to identify potential problem areas and deficiencies in the research instruments and protocol prior to implementation during the full study. It can also help members of the research team become familiar with the procedures in the protocol and can help them decide between two competing study methods, such as using interviews rather than a self-administered questionnaire. The next step in research is analysis of data. Analysis involves steps like categorization, coding, tabulation, etc. The principle for classification or categorization of data has to be based on the problem under study or the hypothesis formulated. The category must be exhaustive and sufficient for classifying the responses. They must be distinct, separate and mutually exclusive. Coding involves grouping of responses falling under a particular category. Tabulation is a means of organizing the responses to facilitate comparisons, bringing up the inherent relations between two or more variables. It is an orderly arrangement of data in columns and rows. Analysis and inference is usually aided by application of different statistical and econometric techniques. There are differences between qualitative data analysis and quantitative data analysis. In qualitative researches using interviews, focus groups, experiments, etc., data analysis is going to involve identifying common patterns within the responses and critically analyzing them in order to achieve research aims and objectives. Data analysis for quantitative studies, on the other hand, involves critical analysis and interpretation of figures and numbers and attempts to find rationale behind the emergence of main findings. Comparisons of primary research findings to the findings of literature review are critically important for both types of studies, qualitative and quantitative. Data analysis methods in absence of primary data collection can involve discussing common patterns as well as debates and discussions within secondary data directly related to the research area. Statistical Package for Social Sciences (SPSS) is being widely used in social science research for data analysis. NVivo is a software program used for qualitative and mixed methods research. Specifically, it is used for the analysis of unstructured text, audio, video and image data, including but not limited to interviews, focus groups, surveys, social media and journal articles. The 10th step in the research is testing of hypothesis. Sociological studies do not always generate data that confirm the original hypothesis. In many instances, a hypothesis is refuted and researchers must reformulate their conclusions. In behavioral sciences, it is not possible to test several hypotheses directly. The social scientist can only test the research hypothesis by establishing some kind of sample of behavior in order to observe it directly. On the basis of these observable incidents, researcher determines whether or not those are consistent with the hypothesis so as to deduce their logical consequences. Thus, an indirect test of proposed hypothesis can only be made. The research hypothesis is the prediction derived from the theory under test. It provides simply an inconclusive test. Actually, a stronger test of logic is formed when a null hypothesis is rejected. The null hypothesis is a hypothesis of no difference, the rejection of which results in acceptance of the alternative hypothesis. The alternative hypothesis is the operational statement of researchers' research hypothesis. In behavioral science research, rejection or acceptance of a null hypothesis is based on 0.05 or 0.01 alpha level of significance. The statisticians have developed various tests like chi-square test, t-test, f-test for purpose of testing the hypothesis. Chi-square test is used in hypothesis testing. It helps to decide whether to accept or reject the null hypothesis. The difference between the t-test and f-test is that t-test is used to test the hypothesis whether the given mean is significantly different from the sample mean or not. On the other hand, an f-test is used to compare the two standard deviations of two samples and check the variability. In the studies where no hypotheses are there to begin with, the generalizations will serve the basis of formulation of hypothesis which may be tested by subsequent researcher in future. The 11th step is generalization and interpretation. After the hypothesis is tested and found valid, it becomes possible on the part of the researcher to reach the stage of generalization, which may be interpreted to be the real value of research. This is only possible in case of hypothesis testing studies. But in the hypothesis formulating studies, where the researcher has no hypothesis to begin with, the researcher may seek to interpret the findings. In other words, researcher may seek to explain the findings of the research on the basis of some theoretical framework which may probably raise some new questions for further researches. The 12th and the last step in research is report writing. Originality and clarity are the two vital components of research report. It is the ultimate test of one's analytical ability and communication skills. It is an exercise involving the entire organization of ideas. The research report needs to be presented in such a manner that the readers can grasp the context, methodology and findings easily. The report comprises of two parts, the preliminary pages and the main text. In the preliminary pages, the report should indicate the title of the research studied, the name of the researcher and the team members, and the name of the institution or the month year of preparation of the report. This should be followed by a preface in which the main context of preparing the report along with key findings must be presented. Towards the end of the preface, the important sources or persons can suitably be acknowledged. The main text begins with an introductory chapter followed by the major aspects of the study organized into different chapters. The introductory chapter should contain a clear statement of the objectives of the study, rationale behind the study, a brief summary of the literature review, hypothesis tested if any, and the definitions of the major concepts employed in the study. The methodology adopted in conducting the study must also be fully explained along with an explicit mention of the limitations of the study. The subsequent parts of the main text should present the major aspects of the study arranged in a logical sequence and splitted into appropriate sections and subsections. The interconnection between different sections should be properly maintained so that the report reads smoothly. The implications of the results of the study should be stated towards the end of the report. The implications of the results may comprise of, firstly, the inferences drawn from the study, secondly, the conditions which may limit the extent of generalizations of the inferences drawn, and thirdly, the questions that remain unanswered along with new areas for further research identified. The conclusion drawn from this study should be clearly related to the objectives or hypothesis stated in the introductory section. The report may also include an executive summary outlining the context and methodology and major findings of the study. The executive summary is placed right at the beginning, that is before the introductory chapter, so as to provide a concise picture of the entire report. Research is a process comprising of various steps from choosing a research topic, defining the research problem, to the interpretation of the data collected and report writing. Every step has its own dynamism and purpose, with the ultimate goal of contributing towards an efficient research endeavor.